Hey y'all, welcome back to the Rhythm Section, brought to you by the Minor Refinery. I'm your host, Corbin Blair. On this episode, we're talking a little bit about the legendary DMX, who unfortunately passed away after this episode was recorded. We will be back with a long-form episode in tribute to his career. Also on this episode, we'll get into some new music from Montreal, London, and Toronto. And if you like what you hear, remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Let's get into the show. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Rhythm Section. I'm joined by Sugar Ray himself, Kyle Bodanis. Kyle, how you doing?
Okay, so what I've been doing is I've been watching a lot of Mike Tyson videos. So what this guy does is he's like super evasive. So he's really good at like, it's something called the D'Amato switch, which was D'Amato, was it D'Amato? It's D'Amato, was his coach that died, who kind of took him in. And he taught him to slip under the punch and then knock motherfuckers out. And it was just like a really cool move. And I've been trying to do that. But since I am not athletic, it's hilarious. So it's going well.
Does it work on a heavy bag? Yeah,
well, because what you're doing is you're trying to like just simulate the movement. Now, like part of the advice that I've been hearing from various like boxer resources and stuff is that you got to try to treat it as if there's a punch coming back your way. So it's just a matter of, practicing the slip and then the punch. And that's kind of how Tyson really knocked people out. Slip the punch and then he would like move to the side of them and then like knock them out when they couldn't hit them. So because he was at the side of them, he could punch them as hard as he possibly could because he wasn't worried about receiving a punch the other way. So he could throw a haymaker, and that's how he was able to like absolutely bulldoze people.
I feel like you're like at the point where you're like picking a different boxer, like weekly at this point, and like studying their game plan.
I'm absolutely there. I fucking love it. See, that's why I like to do it. See, the problem is you can't get fat kids like me to work out because they're like, "Yo, why don't you go for a jog?" It's like, man, jogging is shit. It's shit. But I, do something you like, and that's kind of what I'm doing. So I just listen to tunes, hit the bag. Hopefully. Actually going to prison would probably be good for my boxing career because I could do like some real hard time, it'd be good.
Yeah, if I didn't. Or you could maybe get into like some kind of illegal fight ring. There's options out there for you. We can work on some stuff.
I'd be worried about getting typecast as the meatloaf in the bitch tit Bob of the fight ring, but I can avoid it. I think we're trending in the right direction.
Oh, well, I think we might get Rhythm Section episode going down in Tijuana once the vaccines hit, and we'll take you down there and get you in the fighting rings there.
It's all about making the steady jump from boxing to knife fighting.
Exactly. You already see the vision.
I'm not without ambition.
I mean, that's what it's all about. So let's get into some music talk now. We're back on another episode of the Rhythm Section. We got a lot of music to catch up on that dropped in the last couple of weeks. I think we're going to start off with some somber news. Let's talk about DMX. So on Friday, April 2nd, legendary New York rapper and Rough Riders leader DMX relapsed and overdosed, sending him into a coma. So nearly a week later, he remains in the same state. We have, various reports of that he's might be in a vegetative state. We're, hoping and praying for the best for him, and he's, definitely in our thoughts. He's, such a force to be reckoned with in music. He's a multi-platinum rapper, a very gifted actor. He is somebody who has been pretty open about his struggles with substance abuse for a long time and, has been working through them. So this is, a very harrowing thing to hear. Let's talk about how you got into DMX and some of your thoughts on kind of what's going on and his legacy.
First off, seeing him on, Versus, earlier in the pandemic was really great. It was just such an awesome thing. And I think everyone loved it, and they loved that, he was there and, seeing him with Snoop Dogg doing that. It was really cool. And I think, it kind of was a moment that relit the imagination and the love of what he's done. I mean, for me, Rough Riders Anthem came out when I was in like grade 9, I think. That shit was playing all the time in the hallways, in the parking lot. We'd be quoting lines from it at lunch or in gym class. It's funny because I moved back to Chicago at the very end of ninth grade, and, I was going to Newton Brook for a little bit, and North York represent. And I'll always associate that song with Coming Home because, like, we listened to that shit so much, and pretty much all the way through high school, in general, It's Dark and Hell is Hot was there, And yeah. I'm thinking 2001 and the Slim Shady LP were the only albums that you even remotely heard as much. Like, I would say that probably 2001 and It's Dark and Hell is Hot were like the albums that were most listened to and most heard, whether it's at parties or fucking whatever. And it's it's almost like losing him is like a little bit of your past kind of going away. You know what I mean? I think that he has such personality, and the respect, that people have for him being unabashed about his, about his problems and about the things he's been going through. Because a lot of people try to avoid it. A lot of people try to be phony. And one thing that DMX kind of has always been, whether it's about struggles with drugs, struggles growing up, even like his financial situations, spending time in prison, he's always been an open book about it, and he's never tried to be someone he's not. And I think that is a rare quality.
Yeah, I think, in this era, because of DMX's stature in the early 2000s and late 90s, and he kind of didn't try to force his way into the industry, through the later part of his career. He was there. He was someone who's very revered, but I don't think he's quite, gotten the respect or the status he really deserves. And I think, having him on Versus last year was a part of that. We kind of got to see some of the outpouring for loves for him, and we're seeing a lot of it now, and just his influence and his chokehold on the culture, because the Rough Riders were huge, and DMX like kept the lights on at Def Jam for a long period of time. Like,
I think that is completely underestimated, that what you're just saying right there, that people forget about that, because like for a stretch, first of all, in between Nas and Jay-Z's ascension, there's like a power vacuum that he occupies. You know what I mean? Like, he, like, for a stretch in the late 90s and early 2000s, he was one of the people that dictated the sound and energy and attitude of hip-hop.
Exactly. And like, I think when you look back at anything made in that time period, like a lot of films and TV, like just all the syncs he got, like he was in, prominently featured in, obviously, like Head of State. He was in Down to Earth. Like, that song was everywhere, and the song was a big part of the movie. He was really a soundtrack to a time period, and he just made songs that were so anthemic and so widespread and just all encompassing. And I think that can kind of be forgotten in the glitz and the glamour of his peers and contemporaries, because I don't think he was such a raw figure and such a down-to-earth person himself that it wasn't a lot of like glitz and glamour and like popping champagne with DMX. It was very much like he was just who he was, and he was from Yonkers, and he kind of wore that like a badge. And I think that kind of speaks to who he is now. And we see him being interpolated by Drake, and he gave us a gospel album a few years back, and he's just kind of still been around in culture in a major way, and very open about what he's been struggling with. And to see him fall back like this is really disappointing, and just hoping for the best, like hoping for a miracle and hoping that we get some good news, or there's peace for his family.
Yeah, and I think people overlook that Hell is Hot and Blood of My Blood were like big albums.
Flesh My Flesh, they were huge.
Like such big albums. And it's and also, like, for example, mentoring Swiss Beats, like that's another one.
Yeah.
Like, he's the one who like kind of brought him around, and and then you hear him in people like JPEG Mafia, you hear him in XXXTentacion, and artists like Kendrick Lamar. Like, Kendrick Lamar has come out fully and been like, this guy influenced my shit, especially before I was doing Good Kid, Mad City. Like, he was in that DMX headspace, and DMX is like one of the people who like ushered him into mainstream hip hop. And I think if you're having Kendrick Lamar say, who is I believe in the future going to go down as probably the best rapper from this era, or at least one of the two, if you're influencing him, then you're doing something right, and he will live on through his music if something happens, but also like through all the people he could inspire to. Because again, Swiss Beats is everywhere. So if Swiss Beats is influenced by you, then all of a sudden that your ideas start propagating at an alarming rate, because he's all over the place, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And, to see him, facing this again, and I think that a lot of people are going to, take this time and, this kind of uncertain period and really think and uplift DMX. So I'm glad to hear that. And I'm, hoping against all odds that, we get some kind of news. But he is just like such a huge figure. And I think that anytime that you make a movie and you want to show that it is the early 2000s, like Party Up in Here is playing, you're going to hear that song forever at, sports arenas. He just was such a huge figure in music and still is. And I, just hope for the best, I guess. And, but I don't think we'll see another artist of his caliber for a long time.
No, he's definitely one of the luminaries in our lives that we would be losing.
Yeah, so just praying for the best and for DMX and his family, and hopefully we'll have an update by the next episode, next time we're with you guys. So let's get into some new music right now. We got a lot of new stuff coming out in the past couple of weeks. Did you want to start anywhere? Is there any albums that are on our list that you wanted to talk about first? Or
yeah, I think I'd like to start with, the new St. Vincent. I think, because it was definitely one of the music from her was more of the one of the more anticipated things happening this year. And I think looking at what could possibly drop this year and what has dropped already, and even some of the surprises that we're talking about in here, I think it's going to be a pretty crazy year. So, this album's kind of inspired by the release of her father from prison, at the end of 2019. Like, what do you think we're anticipating on this album? Daddy's Home is the name of the album.
Yeah, like I like the two songs that I heard so far. I think Pray Your Way in Pain is probably my favorite. It looks like, based on what I have on Apple Music, that's the opening song for the album. I think it's a really good opening. I think, she's positioned herself. Do we refer to her, is it she, or do we refer to her as a band? I always get confused. I always think of her as one act, but I
think it's a she. It's like it's a stage name. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm really excited for this album. I think we're gonna see some growth from the last couple of projects. Like, I'd love to see her in concert again. I think it's been a while for me. The video also included for The Melting of the Sun. I really like the 70s aesthetic. I think I kind of get where she's coming from here. So I'm definitely looking forward to hearing the album in full in a couple of weeks.
She described this as a sleazy album that touches on New York in the early 70s. And, the first couple singles really make good on that, especially Pay Your Way with Pain. It's got this funky, raunchy keyboard groove, and she just kind of gives it on. It sounds it's really good. I immediately enjoyed it. She was fantastic on SNL. She's great every time. I haven't seen her. Actually, she's one of the few I haven't seen live. Really, really, really hoping that I get a chance to, especially on this album, which hopefully, pandemic. Anytime with St. Vincent, you can come to expect experimentation and subverting ideas that try to kind of peg her as this and that. And, this album really sounds like a departure, like it's going to be a departure from her other work, but I love that. There's always innovation. She's always trying to not get pinned down by expectations and this is her sound and this isn't. And I think she's definitely one of the more forward-thinking artists that we have in music today.
Yeah. I think to get back to the sound for a second, one of the people we talk on this podcast about the most, we're seeing Jack Antonoff, and he is back on this album, working with St. Vincent extensively. He seems almost like inescapable at this point. Like, he's all encompassing. Anytime we talk about, some songstresses, he is on the albums, behind the boards. So they last worked together on 2017's Mass Education. What do you think the sonic bed that he's going to provide for this album will be?
Well, first of all, I'm intrigued about what that working relationship is. Not because she seems especially difficult to work with, but because I'm curious as to how it contrasts his working relationship with like Taylor Swift and Lana Del Rey. Like, what do you think that dynamic is?
Yeah, like I'm wondering about that too. Like, I'm wondering, like, he's become so ubiquitous at this point. Do you think he's gonna run into like a box, or he's gonna pigeonhole himself because of like who he's choosing to work with? And like, I think he has a range, and I think he's going to keep delivering sounds. But I would love at the end of like this album to maybe sit down and listen to all 3 albums back to back, or 4 albums back to back rather, and try to like draw lines between the two, or between all the albums, and see what his sonic footprint is.
I mean, we don't even try to talk about Jack Antonoff all the time. Like, at this point, you can't really cast doubt on him, because it's at this point it sounds like we are a Jack Antonoff stan podcast, but it's really that you can't talk about popular music right now without like a direct collision course with him. And I mean, he's got the inside track. He gets it. He's in this case, it being how to pull listeners in, how to combine infectiousness with sheer talent, but still kind of like give people the space to, interpret their own music in their own way and like what they want to do. It's pop with with that simplistic substance that he adds to it, where there is emotional weight. It's not frivolous, but at the same time, it maintains that pop sensibility. Some people just get it. He's one of them, and he's going to get even more sought after, to be honest with you, because as the more he does, the more people want to work with him. And I don't think he's going to run into a situation where he's going to be in a box or it's going to get redundant. I think he allows the people to have their own space as artists, and I don't think he's controlling. Like, I don't think him trying to control would be controlling would work well with someone like St. Vincent, who's very on top of their own image and the things they want to put out into the world.
Yeah, I'm also wondering like what's going to happen with Lorde, because I think Lorde's due to kind of come back on the scene, and they last worked together in 2018.
He's going to get nominated for Producer of the Year again.
Oh, yeah, I think he definitely almost deserves one at this point. So I'm wondering, like, when Lorde comes back, if he's going to be, back with her and working on her stuff as well. I really liked what he did, with Kevin Abstract's album on Arizona Baby in 2019.
Yeah, it's another one. Like, that's a different direction than those completely. And
I would love to see him kind of take that on a little bit more and, like, kind of do these, like, unexpected kind of collaborations. Not that like everything feels very expected, but he's just kind of showing up in certain sonic regions, and I would love for more like stepping out of the box. Like,
yeah, I think you want to see that. I obviously, because to me he seems like he can plug into anything really. Like Rick Rubin is another one who can do that. And doesn't have Antonoff's pop sensibilities, but whether you're talking about Neil Diamond, Tom Petty, Slayer, Jay-Z, Rick Rubin, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Rick Rubin can plug into them and interpret and help be kind of a filter for their ideas. And, like a sounding board. So some people are able to work well like that. I think Jack Antonoff is probably, like, again, I would not bet against him at this point. I think he, if anything, like you're saying, should expand his horizons. Be a little arrogant. Go for it.
Yeah, no, I think that that makes a lot of sense. Like, but I mean, like, how far do you go when you're comfortable and when you have a lane and when you're really good at what you do, like Jack Antonoff is?
Like, I mean, that's the thing, is like, what is the end game? That's kind of the thing I'm always asking, is to the where are they going, or like what's the goal question. It's just, what is the idea of that is of that narrative, is what is the end game for Jack Antonoff. I don't know. He just seems to be a like remorseless music producing machine that just is churning out like really good music. See, there's a lot of producers who produce music that comes out, obviously, but and there's a bunch of people who work in a pop landscape, but like the music he puts out is genuinely good, and it's ridiculous how consistent he is.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely agreed. So what do you think, where's St. Vincent going to sit after this album? Are we going to see her tour after this? Is this like positioning for the next run? Is this, doing an album to do an album? Are we going to see a lot of introspection on this with her, father and the 70s kind of theme work that she's laid out?
Yeah, I think the idea is to tour on this. This is like the music already. The two singles that have come out sound great, and I would love to see them live. And they have a lot, they have different energy, but they are uniting that 70s music idea, funky on one side, lo-fi on the other, melody driven, and it's, I mean, you can't even really classify her. Like, you can ask like what genre she is, but then my counter question would always be, what genre would that be? Like, to me, her closest comparison from an artistic standpoint is David Bowie. It's one of her biggest influences, and it shows in the music. Everything is up for grabs with her. She just consumes and interprets. She's honestly one of the most innovative artists we have, and that's kind of what she reminds me of. I don't think she has the Bowie stardom. A different time as well, this all took place, but I think she definitely kind of works from his blueprint.
Yeah, I think there's like a vantage point that she's playing in, and that is, kind of from him. And I think that it gives a certain character to her music where like it's gonna make her stand out from the other Antonoff collaborators. And I think there's a very clear vision on where she wants to go with this. So I'm excited for it, and I'm excited to see the rollout, because I like this idea of like she almost gave us like an EP in the same way that like what we got from Drake with 3 singles before the album. And I think it's an interesting, way to do a release and to do a reintroduction, because I feel like it's like somewhat non-traditional. So I wonder if she's, playing into some of the DSP stuff there, or if she is trying something of a new marketing tactic or something, or if we're going to see other artists kind of, follow this blueprint in terms of releasing.
I think she's working both angles, because there's been a lot put into the vinyl release of this album too, whether it's like just additional tracks that, were in the studio, and live versions that are only exclusive to the vinyl version. So I think what she's doing is, I mean, at the end of the day, from a main line, to the pop audience's vein release strategy is working the DSP situation. And I think it was really smart to put these out, because I think it was smart what Drake did too. Like, if there's issues with Certified Lover Boy, which we don't know, or if things that just need to be like topped up, or whether it's part of some elaborate rollout, like dropping the songs satiates people. And if it's really good music like this too, and that's what they have both in common, like the music they dropped this year is fantastic, then it's fucking awesome. So I'm excited for this. I'm excited for what it's going to be.
So let's get into some other music now. Let's kind of start in Canada. Let's start with the new single from Skiifall. So we're going to go to Montreal with this one. He recently dropped his singles, follow up to his last single called Ting Tin Up 2, featuring Nux, a UK rapper. So it seems like he's kind of gotten some leverage, and Ting Turn Up did really well online in a lot of spaces. It, obviously reached the UK. He seems to have picked up a label in Graduation. So he has some backing now, and they delivered an updated version of his first single, and they added a UK rapper, which, really speaks to the feeling on the first single. And I'm wondering, like, what's kind of next for him now, because I think he is now his talent has been realized. His, sonic connectivity to the UK has been, actualized. The new video looks great. It looks crispy. It's like a kind of a bigger and better version of what we first saw. And I think this really will kind of present as his introduction to people who didn't hear it the last time without, changing too much of the song, adding a few new elements. It gives him like another kind of launch window.
And we need a new album.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I think that's what we'll see. I think that's what they're kind of gearing up for. I wouldn't be surprised if he picked up new management or, has kind of a new team with him, backing him. So I'm excited for it. What did you think of the Ting Turn Up 2, which is hard to say?
I enjoyed it, and Nux is great. And it sounds great, and I'm really into it. And I like the original. Obviously, the original's cool, but this one had a little bit more flavor, and it was like really good to hear. I'm definitely a fan of what he's doing. I just want more, and I think it was you a while back who told me about Skiifall. Yeah, I think when the original Ting Turn Up came out.
Yeah, I was really excited when I heard the original. I think it dropped back in, I want to say maybe September or October. And
I feel like we were at your place, and then you were also showing me the No Tourist album. Videos as well.
Yeah. So I think that kind of like bleeds into my next question a bit there. So we're seeing a kind of renewed sense of sonics that kind of mesh really well between the UK and Canada, specifically Montreal and Toronto with these two groups. How do we think, this is going to improve ties? Because like this is one of the more notable like features that's been done recently. We had No Tourist premiering their video on GRM Daily. Like I'm sure Skiifall will be, picked up by that same crowd. I've seen it kind of get mirrored back by a lot of UK people, and they're really like digging the music. And I don't know if it's going to further the kind of narrative that like, Canada is boring from the UK too much, but I think people are kind of starting to realize like the similar roots and where the music kind of creation is tied in. It takes me back to our conversation with Nick Tyrell.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about that when we were just like thinking about this album.
Yeah, and I'm wondering too, like, what if this is going to kind of be a new avenue for Canadian artists who are playing in that realm. We had like Trey Mission for the longest time, who's been a pioneer of, going to the UK and making a name for himself. So I think we're going to see Skiifall and No Tourist kind of follow that blueprint and start to kind of gain more listenership and, just kind of make their audience a bit more international.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's because while obviously like our hip hop artists are influenced by American style hip hop, and this is one thing that we were talking about in the whole Nicholas Terrell thing, like we have ties in terms of, influences abroad, which is more like the UK hip hop scene. I mean, the US is a melting pot, and that goes for rap as well. The UK, you hear those influences from Jamaica and Ghana and Nigeria, like you hear it. It's very evident in the music. It's not kind of bred out of it. Like they don't breed it out of the music, and I think those ties are a bit of a uniting factor between us, so the climate in the ears are always there, but as more Canadians channel those influences, I think those connections will grow. I mean, at the end of the day, like the US, it's a nationalistic thing always with them, even in hip hop, where it's more focused on what they're doing and thoughts that and their whole thing, where like those Jamaican and African influences are in the DNA of it, but it's not kind of unabashed. It doesn't represent itself in just like the beat timings, aesthetics, or anything like that. So I think Canada and the UK are more in touch with their roots, and I think that is kind of a uniting factor, and why like No Tourists or Skiifall could go there and be successful, because it's not really a dissimilar way of interpreting influences.
Yeah, agreed. I'd really love to hear Skiifall with like a back row G, or like on a track with like Pasaloo.
Pasaloo. Yeah, Pasaloo, or like Heady One would be cool too. Like, you know what I mean? Like I think there's a bunch of artists that Skiifall would sound really great with.
Yeah, and I think like, we're seeing somewhat of a more international scene developing in Montreal that I think in some ways kind of rivals Toronto's, or is, a bit wider than Toronto's. with Kaytranada, Act Like Nate Husser, Clarel, Shalia. Like, I'm seeing a lot more connectivity that's going
Yeah, Nate Husser's great.
to Europe. Yeah, Nate Husser's awesome. But like, just the connectivity is going a bit more forward to Europe, where I think Toronto is still kind of in this very American leaning in terms of its collaborations, but also in terms of the looks and the press that a lot of artists are leaning towards here.
I think that's fair. There's also kind of a relationship between Toronto and Montreal when it comes to music. Like, even if you look at the Canadian indie boom in the early 2000s, it was both of those cities. It was Toronto and Montreal. Toronto bringing out Broken Social Scene, and then Montreal, I believe, was like Stars and Arcade Fire. So like they're always it's happening at the same time, and that's what you want, because them competing against each other and like the subtle competition will always make for things that are better. So like there's really cool stuff coming out of Montreal right now, and as evidenced from this podcast and continuing to talk about this podcast, there's really cool stuff coming out of Toronto. So, but Toronto has always existed as more like what I would say is poppy. You know what I mean? Like, it would exist more like it would be the pop sensibility, whereas I find a lot of artists from Montreal are leaned more towards like artistic flourishes, if you will, or international influence. You know what I mean? Especially because like with hip hop there, like you have a big Haitian community there too, and that sound kind of comes into it, and there's an Ivory Coast community as well there, so like that gets into it.
Congolese. There's
exactly.
There's a lot going on there, and I wonder too if that speaks a little bit to like the formation of the cities and like Toronto's kind of Protestant work ethic and very corporatized culture here, whereas like there's a lot more artistic flourishes in Montreal, and much more of a dance scene, and a more respected nightclub tradition and scene there. Like it's always kind of been a bit more European based, and the aesthetics in the city are a little bit different than they are in Toronto.
And I think Montreal and Quebec in general supports their artists. Like that's a really big thing. We see it in the movie, in films. We see that a lot.
Yeah,
and I believe in music too. But also Toronto's there too. The only problem is Toronto takes a little bit to get excited. You know what I mean? Like it needs to be. It's almost like Toronto's almost like a parent. There's the people who are in the know, but it needs a little, to see a little action before it starts getting excited and really kind of like investing emotionally in artists and stuff like that. I think you even see that in like the can rock in the 90s, or hip hop. You know what I mean?
Oh, definitely. So I think like going from Skiifall, on Ting Turn Up 2, he's featured with Nux, who also appears on the next album I want to talk about.
Yo, that's a segue.
Talking about
that is a fucking segue.
South London's finest. The rapper DC, he just dropped a new project called In the Loop. He's been around since about 2015. This is his third project, album, whatever you want to call it. What'd you think of this project here?
Loved it. Really, really, really liked it. This was a pretty chill album that really kind of got me into good headspace when I was listening to it. Threw it on, fired one up, kind of fell back into it right from the first track. Like, I'm a sucker for those like shimmering Rhodes style piano that pops, at various times in this. And Receipts just had me right away. Just one well-timed and chosen feature with Nux on Bobby and Rowdy that I thought was amazing, which I think is probably the dopest track on the album, which has 10 magnificent tracks. This is a reason why I'm always like, don't put tons of tracks on an album. And we're going to get into the individual tracks on some of the tracks on this, but I wanted more the whole time. Right, this is really one of the early surprise albums for me this year, in that I didn't expect a long-term relationship, but I think we have an album that could potentially be brought up at the 2021 album draft.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. Like, I actually got into DC, I believe it was around this time last year, or whenever this track Neighborhood came out, he put that out. It had an amazing video, and it really just like stuck with me throughout the year. And I was kind of like hoping he would put something out, and almost a year later we get a full album from him. I thought this project was perfect, perfect length of time, really good vibe on it. He is really speaking from the heart. I like what he's kind of talking about with paranoia and growing up, and he's just kind of a very self-aware rapper, and I really enjoyed the sound he's coming with. It's not quite like a lot of what we've talked about out of the UK. So for me, I think it's like a little bit hard to compare it to anything else. I'm gonna get more into Nux because I think he's a name that has been floating around for a long time. I always got him confused with this. There was this rap rock pop group called the Nux a while ago in the early 2000s, and I always just like made that comparison, and so I kind of didn't click.
It was upsetting. Yep.
Yes, and I was missing out because like I listened to Ting Turn Up too, really loved it, and then from there got into his feature on Bobby and Rowdy, and I thought that was just fantastic. So I'm gonna go dig into him a little bit more.
It's such a killer track, Bobby and Rowdy. It's so killer.
Yeah, like I thought it was perfect in the video. It was a really nice accompaniment to it as well.
Yeah, I think the big thing is you're missing kind of the grime influence in this album. You know what I mean? Like you can hear little bits of elements. Like it's really more atmospheric and chilled out. Like it's a very laid back album. It lacks some of the edge, I think, in a good way of his London contemporaries, where like a lot of it is about, and I think obviously, DC is doing this as well, but like when you're talking about, social political problems in council estates and growing up in a rapidly gentrifying city like London, then there's going to be some edge to it, and this is just, it's more soulful, it's more from the heart, not more from the heart, but you know what I mean, like it's a little bit more, it's laid back. I enjoy it. It could take you somewhere. You can throw the headphones on this and enjoy this.
For sure. And I think this is like an album that I will be doing that with for some time. I think like I would probably even like this record on vinyl. I think this is like an album that I'd really like to, chill to and, enjoy some of this gorgeous weather we're having too. It's definitely like an album I'm going to be taking with me throughout the year. Yeah,
I'm wondering if this is the, like, not that the music is the same. This is the, take them to Coventry for this year for me.
Yeah, it could very well be. So let's talk about what tracks,
or send them to Coventry.
What tracks stood out for you on this?
Receipts, God's House. I really love that track. Bobby and Rowdy, honestly, that I honestly love the whole thing. And this is why I'm always advocating for shorter albums, because I wish this was longer. Like I'll take 2 more tracks. I'm like, give me another 2 tracks, and now I'm chomping at the bit for the next taste. So like, this is why you do it. It was just so good. And again, Receipts, the opening track. I'm always a sucker for the opening track. Just sucked me in right away, but it also, kind of closes strong. God's House kind of, really solidifies the spine of the second half of that album. And like, this was really fucking good.
Yeah, I enjoyed like the little bit of skits on it, like the London Underground. Again, Neighborhood, still my favorite song of the last like 2 or 3 years.
It's fantastic.
Always stuck with me. Bobby and Rowdy is a new favorite of mine. Really, really like that one. And I think Tears, Sweat, and Blood will probably be my 3rd favorite on this album. But again, I'm going to be listening to this whole thing for a while. And I think this is a fantastic album. I hope this, kind of elevates him, takes him to the next level. I know he's, already signed working with EMI Records in the UK on Universal. Do you think that we'll see some US fandom or some crossover action happening from him? It seems like he's not really geared that way, but I can't really get a full sense of it. What do you think?
I don't think the wider American music public is ready to fully embrace UK hip-hop. Like, we haven't seen the artist yet, but I theorize that we won't really see it coming. Something will just start catching feels in people, and it'll happen, and then, maybe a floodgate. I don't know. My question, I also don't want it to like be a novelty to them. You know what I mean? My question is, can this album reach the suburbs for that? You know what I mean? Because ultimately that is what you have to do for real cultural penetration in the US. Is you can't just be cool hip hop heads in New York who are listening to it, or, you know, people who are part of, you know, who are influenced by music that has more world influences, like coming from Jamaica and like in Africa, like, because even in hip hop there's nationalism, like not storm the Capitol nationalism, but not into British dudes rapping nationalism.
Yeah, like I think with this, that this is a perfect album that will come on in a playlist, and I think people will be intrigued at what it is and who's rapping. And anyone I've shown from the States neighborhood has really, really liked it and really like got into it.
Yeah, you gotta almost like hide their medicine in food like they're a pet. Because like you just slip it into a playlist and it just comes on. It's like, well, what the hell is this? It's like, well, this is this British rapper DC. Like, well, I didn't really like any British rappers. Well, that's fucking changing, and hopefully that opens this massive fucking floodgate. Hopefully that happens, because it's like, this is really good. And that's one thing in learning more about UK hip hop and listening to it, is that like my first reaction was like, this is Mary Poppins sounding shit, and then all of a sudden I'm like, this is really good. These people are rapping like crazy. Like the lines, like bar for bar, these, you know, the UK rappers are bringing it. And I would say that they can easily rival their American counterparts currently, especially like from a technical standpoint.
Yeah, I think with DC that his stuff will catch on. I don't know. I think there might be a ceiling on him, and that's not, you know, in a negative way, and because I think his music's amazing, but I think he'll have to dig a little bit deeper or give us something a little bit more eye-catching and more shiny, I think, and that will be the one that maybe catches on American soil. Though I don't know, because I think that he's making really good music, and I think people's ears are a little bit more open now to other styles. And I really hope that, like, you know, this kind of gets him on more people's radar, because I really think he deserves to be there.
And just to close it with, I think that is something that's good about DSPs, because if you're like, okay, who's this guy? Like, you hear it on a playlist or whatever, you can just go in and listen and experiment and figure out what you like and expose yourself to new people. This is kind of why I did enjoy, and don't okay boomer me, when Napster came out when I was young, because like I was always buying albums. But like for me, it was a way to kind of discover new people and you know, that I had heard of without having to like shell out money for an album. And if I like the album, I go get it. And the DSPs, you know, have introduced me to UK hip hop, so I know their business model sucks sometimes, but there is some good to come out of them.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the guys who started Napster, like Sean, they had a vision for, you know, what it was, and really like the DSPs just picked up on that model. So I think there's, you know, inherent flaws with it, of course, and, you know, artists should be getting paid more, but I think a lot of that kind of the blame lies at the feet of the record labels and consumers as well. So
100%.
I think, like, you know, things like Bandcamp are great, and, you know, paying for merch and doing all these things, because that's where the money, unfortunately, is going to be made, because it's hard to put a lot of value in music because people consume it so rapidly, and there's so much out there, you know, 60,000 songs added a day to the DSPs. And it's hard, like, you know, how do you price it? Like, what are people comfortable paying with? You know, Spotify has their free option, and there's something nice about, you know, paying that $10 a month and being able to pull up, you know, almost any song you want at any time, and, you know, playlisting it or playing it for friends or sharing it. And I think that ability isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon, even as we realize, you know, artists are getting the short end of the stick there a little bit.
Absolutely.
So let's head back to our home city before we kind of wrap things up here. And let's talk about Clairmont the Second. He recently dropped an EP, I may call it, or 3 singles. I don't know what people are calling things.
Yeah,
these days.
What is the? Yeah, everyone's like, this is a mixtape. This is a fucking concept mixtape. This is a fucking playlist. I have no idea anymore.
Playlist, like, I don't know. There's all types of different names. Some artists want things called different things. I just call stuff projects, I think, these days, and it kind of is all encompassing for me. Yeah, I think that's a good vernacular. I like that. Yeah, like this is you know, a Clairmont 3-pack. It's a follow up to his brilliant 2020 album, It's Not How It Sounds, which, you know, I think was very slept on by most people. We will see what happens with the Polaris Prize this year.
I think he's just slept on, period, to be honest with you. Like, Clairmont the Second.
I would agree. I think there needs to be a lot more talk about him.
He's good.
And
like, he's good. Like, he's fucking really good.
He's like better than good. He's amazing. He's putting out really high level bodies of work, you know, self-produced, self-directed, you know, with assistants, you know, writing all this stuff. He is just a creative powerhouse, and, you know, still very young. I believe he's like 22, maybe, if that, or 23. And I think that, you know, if he existed in another city, you know, specifically I'll say Chicago, because I think there's a lot of sonic ties with what he's doing and you know, the music that I'm seeing from that city in particular. Mm-hmm. But I think if he was coming out of another city, there would be a lot more hype and belief in him. And I don't know if you know, Canada or Toronto or the media institutions are really picking up on his genius.
So for you, you feel like it is a matter of just a lack of support with him?
I think there's a lack of institutional support for him, and I think we'll get into that in a second. Let's quickly ask you what you thought about the 3 songs. What do you think? You know, did one stand out for you?
Yeah, No You Don't is such a sick track. It's really good. I mean, like, I liked all 3 of them. I generally think he's one of the best rappers from Toronto. Like, I think I would be in agreement. Yeah. Like, I'm thinking about how much, like, I'm not saying Tory Lanez is from Toronto or a rapper, but like, what if we just switched the attention that was on him and put it on Clairmont the Second, even though it's not really, you know what I mean? Like,
I'm 100% here for that.
Yeah, like, there's really, like, what was funny is I feel like I was out of touch with how underappreciated he was, because I've like lived in this little bubble where I'm just listening to Clairmont the Second all the time. So I'm like, no one's fucking banging this at all. This guy's not getting nominated for Junos. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, I mean,
I think that's what I wanted to touch on next. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, there's really like atmospheric keyboard parts on this that are really cool. His bars are fucking sick. He's just, I don't know. He's good. His flow is good.
Yeah. Like, he's just really just doing things and competing at a high level. But yeah, let's get into the Juno stuff a little bit there, because how in the world did It's Not How It Sounds not get nominated in the rap category?
Well, you know my thoughts on awards, but yeah. Like, I don't, like, I really think he's one of our best rappers again. These 3 songs are great. It's really good stuff. This was actually a dope podcast to get ready for, as I've said, because all the stuff we got to listen to is really good. And if it's a Juno he's looking for, it's probably not the most politically expedient situation to say this, but I really, you know, from an artistic standpoint, like, he shouldn't care. Because, I mean, one thing that you pointed out when we were talking about the Grammys was just like, you know, I'm like, fuck the Grammys, but I'm also not in a label investing money who we'd like, and you know, a Grammy increases, you know, just the business opportunities for artists. And I think with the Juno, you know, from that situation for people, especially now that he has a label where it that he's represented, like that may be an important thing, but like, artistically, I don't really think he can be denied. And my issue is that I just wish more people thought that.
Yeah, like, I mean, just looking at the Juno noms this year, between like all the artists nominated, there's like this kind of goofy duo like from Vancouver, you know, 88 whatever they're called is sorry, I'm forgetting the name right now.
I can't remember.
Nav's there. Yeah, I mean, there's a few artists there, and I think that there's very, very clearly that, you know, Clairmont deserves a spot there. And I remember him tweeting, you know, something like he didn't remember if he even submitted, like he had to double check if he submitted. And I don't think that you can compare those bodies of work and say that, you know, he's not worthy of some kind of recognition. His last time he got nominated was 2018 when he was on Black Box Records. I think that was with Quest for Milk and Honey. So I'm wondering, like, you know, is there something like not being done for independent artists to get nominated? Like, I think, you know, when we're going to look back in 10 years and 20 years on the defining Canadian rap albums the defining Toronto rap albums, like Clairmont's going to have a lot of projects on there, and I think that he's being done a disservice to not be recognized for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is not supporting independent artists. I think that is just like a base note for the city in general. And then, I mean, going back to the the whole Terrell Morris interview where he was talking about a lack of spaces. I think that's another thing, but that's more of a like across the board type situation as well. I think this is a case of people not getting it and just overlooking it, not having the taste. Like, I don't, for me, I like, what I want to know is like, what is the end game for him? Because it would be shitty if he stopped making music because, because it just wasn't something that he could build a life on, you know what I mean? Or, releasing music as his primary job. Because, like, at some point, if you're not getting the recognition and then you're not getting the financial stuff, it's like, well, what do you do from there? You know what I mean? But then again, he's pretty punk rock about these things. Like, he just kind of does his shit. That's it. There's an auteur element as well.
Yeah, like, I think, like, he loves music and he's, kind of made that clear that's something he wants to do. I think, at some point, he is going to find a situation, either like a label or publishing or something that maybe fits him. Like, I know he's a very proud independent artist, and I think that, is part of who he is. But I think that there's going to be something that comes that's going to elevate him, out of this. And, Toronto is going to be, and maybe like the Junos as a whole or Canada as a whole is going to be, quick to claim him and quick to, big themselves up for his, perceived success or his success. And I think by that point it's going to be too late, because I think you can't keep making music like he's making and, not be mentioned in conversations elsewhere in the world. So I think, he's going to get out there, somehow, some way. And I think we're just going to be behind the ball in Canada. And I think the Junos are going to be behind the ball. But, I like that we have other outlets. The Prison Prize exists. There's, other ways for music to get recognized, and I think that he should be in those kind of categories, and he has been before. So I think that's where we're going to see him. I would love for these institutions in Canada to kind of wake up. Like, he does get he gets coverage, like he's being talked about, but I think that, or how much he's doing and how good that he is, I don't think that it's all the way there yet.
I think it's one of these Freddie Gibbs situations, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison.
You know what I mean? Where you spends a decade in obscurity almost, and then all of a sudden, like, we're talking about his next. He's getting nominated for Grammys. We're talking about like the crazy producers he's gonna have on the next album. He's gonna have like Alchemist and Madlib, and I think he was saying like Swiss Beats, and just a bunch of different. I think Pharrell as well is going to be producing, because I think the Complex article was saying that he was just getting out of a session with Pharrell. Like, you don't work with all these people unless you have talent, and I really, 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 really think that Clairmont the Second is going to be in the same boat. I think there's only so long you can be denied when you're at his level. Like, he's legitimately a really, really good rapper, and his music is really good. And I think at some point that's going to be recognized. It's just, you hope that he's still full steam ahead in the industry, but it sounds like he will be, because it's fair, like, already, like, the resilience is without question.
For sure. And I think, that's a good note to kind of wrap things up on. Again, prayers up for DMX. Kyle, thank you so much for joining me.
No, not a problem. Always a pleasure. And I hope we are not pouring one out for DMX. I hope we're going to be talking about more music in the years to come. But, hoping it works out.
For sure. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Look forward to talking to you again soon.